21st, 2025. Time 6:01. Brandon, start with the roll call, please.
Wilson,
Here.
Bowman. Here. Boers.
Here.
Nixon. Stevens.
Here.
Sellers.
Here.
West.
Here. And I believe the only item that we have on the agenda is presentation of the downtown master plan. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that goes straight to our presenter?
Yes.
All right. Welcome, sir. If we could have your name and address, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Anthony Miave. I am the project manager for Beck Design. I'm an architect and urban designer. Really happy to be here and thank you for your time. One of the things we want to address today from an overall standpoint on the master plan, we are on step 2 of 3. So we just wrapped up step 1 and kicking off step 2. Step 1 being all the data gathering and analysis. Step 2 being presenting concepts to you guys, to the city, and to the community to see, have their input, their feedback on what we're doing correctly, what they would like to see. So for this first part, I'd like to turn it over to Lexi with one of our consultants. I believe she is, there they are. So they're going to start with the market impact analysis.
Yep. Thank you, Anthony. Mike is going to share our screen here today, and we're just going to take you all through just kind of a quick overview on our methodology, as well as some of those key findings and understanding really what opportunities lie for the downtown area is our main goal, talking with you all here today, and then hopefully leaving a good amount of time for questions that we can provide more insight and clarity into. But to get us, am I good to start? Any
Yes.
questions? Good to go? Okay. So quick overview again on Hyundai, just a fresh reminder on who we are. We like to say that we work in very cool destinations all around the country, as you can see by this lovely map here, really applying those market realities, data analytics to live, work, play, visit, placemaking. We say placemaking not just as a buzzword, but as a concept or a moral that really does drive a lot of our work. And Micah, we're seeing a different version. Oh, there we go. And so looking here at the bottom, sort of asset classes, those are what we typically specialize on. And we've done obviously advisory work. We've done feasibility work. Here today, we're more so focused on kind of the holistic downtown master plan view. So really identifying those needs of the community and opportunities for Jenks, where some of either short-term developments or more long-term could hopefully meet and address those needs. So in short, why we're here, why now for this study. So really identifying that opportunity as taking what Jenks has been able to establish in terms of that current visitor baseline, but also resident community asset side of things, and really turning that into the vibrant mixed-use destination that ultimately drives economic growth and reflects the needs of, again, that growing community, what's been established, and how can we really meet and cater those needs of local residents as much as we want to attract new people to come into our area here. First bullet point really talks about those just current commercial offerings specifically to the downtown area. They're just not in terms of meeting the demand with that population growth. So when we say that there's opportunities or gaps, that's what we're really referring to, is that it's ultimately limiting that economic opportunity and reducing the vibrancy of the downtown area. There is kind of a lack of or minimal walkable infrastructure when we think about connectivity from the downtown to the riverfront. And we'll get into some details in a few slides from here, but that really does overall hinder the mobility and weakens that overall visitor experience when we think of walkability, but also opportunities to keep a visitor in the area for a longer period of time. Right now, that is being hindered because people either have to get into their car, find a parking spot, go downtown, go to the riverfront. It's not necessarily a clear path forward that it could be because of its physical proximity. And then finally, that shortage of family-friendly amenities. Right now, there obviously is the aquarium and a few things around there that becomes that destination driver for a lot of people visiting the community. But in terms of going to places before or after, there is a limited or a shortage of that infrastructure to support. So that's leading to the unmet needs for residents and missed opportunities to attract and retain visitors. Next slide here just gives an overview of kind of what went into our study methodology and project overview. So our process was a few months long, as Anthony was kind of explaining where we are now. So what our analysis took into account was understanding that where you are now. So looking at the current supply of downtown Jenks in terms of our typical market assessment. So when we think of retail, when we think of multifamily, hotel, understanding what that supply currently looks like, and then also engaging with local community stakeholders as well as national retailers to understand kind of where there's further opportunity to either leverage our existing supply or maybe introduce some new product development to hopefully fill a gap that currently exists in that market. How do you stack up? So we took a look at the regional supply and influence of the greater Tulsa area. Why do people currently leave Jenks if they're residents and they're going to an adjacent community for the weekend or for a specific event? And how could that be recaptured if we were to think of new product in the area? But also looking at case studies. So we looked nationally at case studies, some more comparable, some more aspirational, of kind of where these communities or cities were about 10, 15 years ago and what development they took into place, and also really understanding the role of the public sector when it comes to really being that catalyst for development and hoping to bridge not only the city's vision, but also kind of meeting the needs of the private sector and hopefully having a partnership that benefits each other. So overall market opportunities assessment and future recommendations is what that led to, really honing in on what those opportunities could look like over the, again, short term, medium term, long term. So when we think of 5, 10, 15 years from now, what Jenks could look like. And then we ran some demand and financial projections. So how do we get there? A big part of that is that economic, fiscal, and employment impact analysis. So understanding not only the financial viability or performance of some of these assets, but then also what it could bring to the community from new spending, from jobs, from new tax revenue, and really assessing that quantitative value as much as we did the qualitative in terms of enhancing that overall quality of life. Our next slide here just does our study area in terms of what we were coining as kind of that downtown area, and also that proximity again to the riverfront, the aquarium, but everything that we took into account when we're referring to what the downtown currently supports or what it has in terms of supply, and then where there's opportunities to further build upon or expand. Overall headlines and kind of our summary here. So we wanted to identify what those key opportunities, but also considerations were, especially moving forward, to turn this in from data and market realities to action items, and how do we really achieve this and implement this from a city perspective. So looking at our key opportunities. So again, improving that walkability and traffic congestion. You're going to hear us talk about the visibility and traffic as it is a strength, but it can also be a weakness in terms of not necessarily encouraging a pedestrian-friendly environment. So how to really support the needs of pedestrian infrastructure, such as walkways, traffic calming measures, but also enhancing that downtown accessibility in order to really boost that foot traffic naturally. The riverfront connectivity, again, really transforming some of those middle way assets, so to speak, between the traditional downtown and Jenks and the riverfront, and how to really connect the two to establish that seamless connection. What we say is really giving it a sense of place from a visitor or even a resident experience, not necessarily having the feeling of, should I be walking here? Is this allowed? You want it to really feel like it's intentional with a sense of place. Vertical development to increase density. So obviously really wanting to optimize that land use by developing a mix of uses. This also helps to really create a critical mass when we talk about a denser, more vibrant downtown core. there is kind of that ideal mix of uses that a lot of downtowns try to emulate. And a big recipe for this success is with those denser buildings. So having either office or multifamily and then ground floor retail, restaurant space, to also provide kind of that 18-hour day. When we think of live, work, visit, play, we want to make sure that we're catering to all those needs to really encourage the maximum amount of visitation and experience as possible. In terms of those key considerations, so public and community buy-in, obviously this proactive engagement with local property owners, stakeholders, and broader community is really crucial for addressing those concerns, not only at the forefront of our kind of feasibility work, but also throughout implementation. So presentations like this, but also making sure that we're communicating to the community, this is an asset. This is something that there is public benefit to, where there is that natural community buy-in, because ultimately that unified approach supported by that public buy-in is really essential to ensuring the success of these efforts and achieving shared goals. Land availability, we talked about it, but obviously it's no secret that there is limited available land in downtown Jenks. So really wanting to be strategic about that planning and prioritizing those developments that yield not only the highest economic return, but also, again, that community benefit. Time to completion, just wanted to note, obviously, that there are some more attainable options that could be achieved within the short term, or what we call phase one, within 5 years. But there are also some initiatives that would take more time, likely taking a little bit longer to achieve, really requiring that long-term vision, but also sustained commitment from all stakeholders, and also in terms of those recommendations. So for our recommendations and priorities identified, we didn't want to necessarily just pick the trendiest, coolest thing that's going to be cool for about 2 to 3 years and then find a new use for it, but really having those sustainable recommendations as much as we're having kind of these other considerations and opportunities here. And then I'm going to pass it on to Micah to talk about some of our common stakeholder feedback themes throughout our conversations and some of those market headlines here.
Yeah, thanks, Lexi. This slide summarizes some of the key themes that sort of emerged from our stakeholder engagement efforts. One being that the Jenks public school system stands out as the cornerstone of the community. It really drives a lot of families to move to Jenks, and it's a really attractive asset to have for the Jenks community. And to my previous point, it is bringing a lot of population growth to Jenks because they want to send their children to the schools and be a part of the community that Jenks provides. But this, in recent years has provided sort of a disconnect between the new Jenks residents with the residents that have been there, for longer periods of time, which sort of challenges the cohesion and shared identity of the community. And then here we also noticed that stakeholders are recognizing that the potential of dam Salt River can really position Jenks as a unique riverfront destination, opening up a ton of opportunities. One being, improved pedestrian traffic. We can do that through adding crosswalks, stoplights, and I'll here in the coming slides, I'll show you just how much traffic you all get on that main street. And I'm sure you all know better than anyone else. But if we start to add some stoplights, some stop signs, and really slow down some of that traffic that's coming through Main Street, there's going to be an opportunity to get those people into stores and have them spending money in that downtown district. There is an opportunity in downtown Jenks to create that live, work, play environment, with the inclusion of some additional office space and retail and maybe some restaurants and bars. We can really create a dynamic district that has full day activation, 16-hour activation. And then again, lastly, we can shift the focus of downtown and the riverfront to become a tourist destination for that retail, restaurants, and events, and really drive economic impact. Some challenges some foreseeable challenges that we may see in the future as a lack, going back to that identity, is a lack of unified future vision. Everyone's got to be on the same page to to be able to transform a downtown district in the way that you guys are hoping to see here in the future. Another challenge is some limited parking and congestion that, Lexi hinted to previously. This kind of discourages pedestrians from walking downtown. I know that we had our site visit a little bit ago. We almost got stuck in our minivan trying to pull out onto Main Street just because it was so packed. So that could definitely be improved. And then again, going back to Lexi's previous point, these elevated land and property prices are gonna create some barriers to fund some of this construction, just because developers have to see a return on their investment, and with rising land and property values, that is going to prove to be challenging. Here, I wanted to highlight some key demographic trends that we've seen in Jenks. I don't have to tell you all that Jenks is growing like a weed, with 63% population growth since 2010. But I really do want to highlight that daily traffic volume and potential drive-in market. So you all are seeing on Main Street 10,000 plus cars a day, which is really attractive, and it really presents an opportunity to, once we add in a few crosswalks, some stop signs, some traffic lights, to get those people out of their cars and into stores, into Jenks restaurants, retail, and spending money in that downtown district. There's 6.5 million people within a drivable distance of 3 hours to downtown Jenks. That's a really attractive stat line. It just shows the potential to bring tourism to the city of Jenks and really drive economic impact. Here we saw this slide really outlines some of the key market trends and development opportunities based on our analysis of the current offerings in Jenks. So we've seen a recent trend and a clear shift in demand for smaller, more flexible, high quality office space that's highly amenitized. Pre-COVID, an attractive office looked like, a skyscraper with as many floors as you can put in the building, as many tenants as you can have. Whereas post-COVID, we're really seeing a shift in downsizing, and companies really wanting to offer that work from home flexibility. So their need for a tremendous amount of office space has decreased drastically. We do see a strong retail market within downtown Jenks, low vacancy with high rental rates, and which is expected to grow as demand continues to grow and construction and development goes on in the downtown Jenks area. There's also a high demand for new housing development. There's a shortage of available housing due to that drastic population growth you all have seen this last decade. That there's a prime opportunity, with the demand for retail and the demand for housing, to create some mixed use multifamily projects and mixed use opportunities there on that downtown Main Street strip. There's also some opportunity to expand entertainment offerings. Jenks is already home to the Oklahoma Aquarium and then also the Tulsa Premium Outlets, but by layering in some complementary entertainment, such as some live performance venues or some more dining, restaurants, family-friendly attractions, you're going to be able to further enhance that visitor experience and really encourage people to, one, visit Jenks, but also stay longer. There's going to be future demand for hotel development, again, coupled with that population growth that you're seeing. And then also, once development continues, and it begins and continues over the coming years, and you bring more of those entertainment, more retail, more dining to that downtown strip, it's gonna show a need for increased hotel rooms, just to facilitate the increased number of tourists. As Lexi alluded to earlier, we did reach out to several organizations and and different communities within the region and nationally to really understand, what's driving their decision making in investing in their own downtown districts. So what we've come across from speaking to these people is that dynamic programming and events really drive engagement downtown. Year-round programming and events are in their experience are essential to activating that downtown and really creating that 16-hour activation that I was speaking about before. Walkability and amenity-rich environments fuel growth. No one wants to go to a place where they feel like they have to drive 2 minutes, can't find parking, don't want to get out of their cars, but really creating that walkable destination. And Jenks Main Street is a beautiful street that can become walkable and a really attractive place for people to visit. But again, with retail, dining, some more crosswalks, some better lighting, people will be encouraged to leave those cars and get out and walk in downtown Jenks. And then speaking of adding on to the mixed use multifamily and really building vertically just to add on to make the most of the available land within Jenks, the scalable design really ensures that it's going to last for a long time. Lexi said that we're not looking to build something that will last 2 years and then we have to knock it down and build something else. We really want to maximize the amount of land available and build for the future, as Jenks is growing so much and so fast. Next, I'm going to go into sort of our recommendations for phase one being that 1 to 5 years. Office development, we really recommend you developed about 50,000 additional square feet of office, really taking into account those new trends that we've seen. So some high quality space, have some amenities, some co-working areas. So less a big box office, but really specialized, smaller, more intimate spaces. Restaurant and retail, the downtown area has a really strong retail scene. It can be built onto. We do recommend about 40,000 square feet of additional retail over the next 5 years. We recommend offering a mix of dining as well as that boutique retail, just to increase that. I'm sorry.
There you go.
You're back.
We lost you for a second.
Oh, cool. Gotcha. But yeah, we do recommend you all, look into building about 40,000 square feet of additional retail. That's going to really create some vibrancy on that main street and really get people out of their cars and walking on that in the downtown district. I spoke before about the housing shortage in Jenks. I'm sure you all are familiar with that, but we do recommend you add about 150 multifamily units as well as at least 25 townhomes. And these recommendations are built off of what we feel the market can support today. Housing, more is always better. You guys aren't getting any smaller in the city of Jenks, but what the market could support today, given the land restrictions and what's available to develop, we do recommend about 175 units being added to the market over the next 5 years. And hotel, as you begin to build that office, that restaurant, retail, it's going to bring more tourism we expect it to bring more tourism to the city of Jenks. And, with more tourists and more overnighters, you're going to need additional hotel rooms. So we do recommend you build a boutique hotel of about 80 keys. Some additional recommendations below, going back to, our previous points of some need for additional family-friendly entertainment. That's going to be a constant growing need for the city of Jenks. You could also create a public plaza with some green space, maybe add some bike stands and public charging stations, just to promote that walkability and get people out of their cars and walking that downtown strip. And with meeting and event spaces, there is some event space, that can be used for meetings, but we do recommend that you focus on maximizing the use of what you already have, just to support ongoing events and some of this flexible programming.
I can hear you fine. It might be on our end, I guess. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's
How
interesting.
about now?
Okay.
We've been having some Wi-Fi issues on our end, so sorry about that. Did you guys catch the end of that, or did you miss anything? I want to make sure you guys heard it all. Yeah. The meeting and event spaces. So really, I was just saying that, you all do have some meeting and event spaces that you use for hosting, and we do recommend that you just work to maximize those spaces as best you can. The market doesn't necessarily support additional square footage development of some of these meeting and event spaces. With being surrounded by Oklahoma City and Tulsa, those are more so the meeting markets, so to speak. So we do recommend that, although we're not recommending additional square footage be dedicated to some of this meeting and event spaces, those current spaces that you have now can always be maximized. Here we have the development timeline and some of the financial analysis behind our recommendations. So it being 2025, these developments are going to happen overnight. So we project that it's going to be completed by 2028, and then we've given it about 4 years for each of these assets to stabilize. With 40,000 square feet of retail, 50,000 of office, 150 units of multi, 25 units of townhomes, and then an 80 key boutique hotel. We really think this is achievable. If the markets allow it, that interest rates are forever fluctuating and construction costs are forever fluctuating. But we feel that, 2028, this could be a reality, and it's stabilizing by 2032. Let me know if you guys have any questions as well. Please feel free to stop me. I don't want to run over any of you guys' questions that you may have as we're going through some of this stuff.
And then here, and this is our last slide that we have, so we'll get to questions following this, but we wanted to just show kind of what that 30-year summary of impacts would be. And obviously this is for all of the uses that were kind of identified as those priority uses, looking at total direct, indirect, and induced spending. And then the table you see there on the right is kind of that average annual impact. So once those assets are stabilized, what could the city or the local economy kind of realize on an annual basis? And that's what that's showing. So about 1.8 million in terms of those fiscal city impacts or tax revenues from sales tax, hotel tax, property taxes, as well as that 25 million in spending. And this is kind of how we frame it as, but for the elements of this project, or but for this project, essentially, what would the city of Jenks be missing out on in terms of economic impact? So when we look at that total 30-year summary, looking at the projected city tax revenue of about 55 million, with a large portion of that coming from the city property taxes, 30 million directly from those property taxes, 18 million from those sales taxes, and 7 million roughly from the city hotel tax. And then this would support, or expected to generate, 776 million in total spending and supporting about 192 million in new earnings, which would then contribute to the local economy and create or support up to 282 full-time or equivalent jobs at its peak. So this kind of giving that perspective of not only what the demand and financial projections could look like from an owner and operator standpoint, but also for the city, understanding really what that economic and community impact could look like over, again, 30 years, and then that average annual is a snippet of what a development like this could be. Again, really wanting to position it as a catalyst for spending, but also for further development. So this is really just taking into account what we had outlined there for phase one elements. But happy to open it up to any questions here now and provide further clarity where there might be needed. I think a good slide for us to park at would be maybe our recommendations to earlier. If you want to, I would do yeah, perfect. Thank you. Any questions?
Greg, do you have a question or comment?
No, sir.
Gina?
In the, I think it's the housing, that 175 units, does that include anything that we currently have projected? Or is this?
This would be in addition to what would be projected. And again, this is really taking into account just that downtown area.
Okay,
So looking at adding 150 multifamily units and 25 townhomes to support that mixed use density.
okay, thank you.
Rob? Ready? I'm trying to as well. Can you explain to me how stop signs, stoplights on Main Street help get people into stores?
Yeah, I think that's really to take into account just again that built infrastructure that can support more of a pedestrian friendly environment when we think about walking to and from stores, just encouraging kind of that longer or expanded visitor dwell time. So right now what we're seeing is obviously a lot of traffic when it comes to vehicular traffic, not necessarily pedestrian or walking, but obviously understanding that sometimes when streets close or things like that, there is more of an encouragement to come to downtown and walk and have that spillover. So really the point of that is just more so to promote a more pedestrian friendly downtown, not necessarily a recommendation of adding 3 more stoplights or 3 more stop signs. It was more just an anecdote.
Who were the stakeholders that Hunden interviewed?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we spoke with at the local level, I think it was over 20 stakeholders at the local level, and that was through our site visit, but also through follow-up calls. So had great conversations with the Chamber of Commerce, had great conversations with some of the local developers, and also then speaking with obviously city and public officials as well to understand just not only where kind of Jenks is at currently, but also what the potential could look like, especially from a city support role. We do have a list of that, though, if you would like us to circulate that.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. So the chamber, developers, and other public officials, did you talk to downtown business owners?
We did, and we also spoke with a few of, I was going to see if I could pull it up here.
Marcy,
Also
these are
the
some of the
local
meetings we had at the Hive, right? I was
local
there, Scott.
hotels as well is what I was going to add to that. But also some of the downtown business owners. I think the one Red Dog that's also located downtown. We had a few calls with them just to understand, even from a construction standpoint, not only being a downtown tenant, but also kind of what they're seeing in terms of demand for new construction and what that looks like.
Just to add to a little more context, as far as the site visits, we did hold 3 separate meetings where we invited different merchants, business owners, and 1 city officials to meet with them and get their input. This was a larger meeting at the Hive. And then that was followed up with one-on-one interviews with Hunden, myself, and other local stakeholders. And those, I believe, like you said, we can make that public. We try to keep those as anonymous to get as much feedback, true feedback as we can.
I would
But,
add the school was invited and participated, so we had a representative from the school. It was, I did most of the invitations. It was property owners on Main Street, as well as business owners on Main Street, the school district, the chamber, and we had a planning commissioner, which was Mr. Bowman, and we had a counselor, which was Mr. Brown, who's present this evening. And then there were at least one church represented, but they would have been a property owner, so they would have been invited as a property owner.
You said in your presentation that we should add, it's your recommendation that we should add 40 to 50,000 square feet of office, 150, 175 multifamily units, and a boutique hotel of around 80 keys. Who's the we that should do that?
In terms of development?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's definitely something that would come as kind of a natural next step. It's something that we've obviously had experience in terms of advising. 80% of our work is with the public sector, but we also understand that it's not necessarily feasible or plausible that the city would take on, obviously, developments that align more with a private sector interest. So we've advised city clients that can also then attract some of these developments in terms of not only testing out interest, but also being able to gauge what the developer interest could look like. But ideally, there would be, if it's not a city partnership with a developer, it would be something that would make the most sense financially or feasibility wise for kind of that public-private partnership, if it's not feasible on its own.
So Lexi, can you use different words or analysis?
Happen. So I guess I'm just more curious as to who do you all think that the we is that should do this and complete it in 3 years? Because sometimes we have
We did get
PUDs that
5
come through
years.
that don't get completed in 5 years, just on a single
Right.
project.
Right. We did do 5 years for the first phase, and we obviously understand that not necessarily all of these developments or all of these assets could be attainable at once. It's more so just identifying, again, what the market is really missing or what it could support in terms of demand that's not necessarily meeting the supply. But understanding too, I'm just from a perspective of, obviously we give recommendations as to what the downtown could see, not necessarily recommending that the city goes out and builds all of this, but more so could be an advisory partner, or understanding that the city has the ability to, and again, this is kind of more of a jumping ahead of where we're at right now, but having the ability to attract some interest. And this is a process that we've helped a lot of cities through, doing those requests for proposals, doing the requests for interest if we're not necessarily at a specific use or asset class yet, and going through and giving recommendations. And these can be targeted to, different development firms. We have had conversations throughout the greater Tulsa market in terms of developers, and it seems like there is a healthy interest from a development side of things, which is why we like to gauge them during our feasibility conversations to understand from a private developer perspective, would this be something of interest? Do you see a need here? And that's why these recommendations really come from a lot of analysis that we're kind of condensing or shortening into 15 or so slides here today. Again, not necessarily something we're recommending that the city goes out and builds, but more so having the ability to have a partnership attracting developers, working with public, city, and private developers to create a development such as this. But it does take different shapes and forms in many different communities, and we've dealt with that. But again, I feel like I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, because not necessarily there yet. But it is something that could be a potential.
You had mentioned the challenges of getting on and off of Main Street and parking. And what recommendations do you have for direct street parking? And also, what have you seen in other cities with the same challenge that would be a good recommendation?
I'll let Lexi start to answer that, but I do have some examples that we can show after this portion of the presentation that addresses some of the parking.
Mm-hmm. I know we had a specific parking study as part of our greater analysis, so I will let those experts answer that.
That's, as far as these additions go in phase one, are there enough open plats to make that happen, or are we going to have to repurpose lots within the downtown district?
Sorry, I think I heard it all. Open. Was there enough open land?
Enough open spaces, open pieces of property that don't have any building on it? Can we do that, or do we need to buy houses and repurpose that property?
I think that's something
Anthony,
we're
I see
looking at
yeah.
in the next phase. One of the things we have identified as of now is how many vacant buildings there are, what their previous use was, and compare that to what the recommendations are. So we have started a matrix that shows those different mixed scenarios, whether it's new, retrofitting an existing, or just actually utilizing a space that is vacant for the purpose that was previously used.
Okay. And so your parking will take that into account, because obviously if we repurpose or have density added into the downtown district, we have to have parking to accommodate that.
Yes, that is correct. So we also have a parking consultant. We're not presenting their findings today. However, the first part, they were physically able to count all the parking for over 3 days, one of them on a typical weekday, on a weekend, and during an event festival, and analyze all of the parking, use national metrics to identify what a kind of a true parking count would be, irrelevant of what the zoning is. So that's the first phase. So we know what we have in parking, what the uses are, what the peak demand is, and what days those are. So the next phase, after we have kind of community input on what they would like to see from an amenities standpoint, then, and if these recommendations were to be accepted by the council, and this is a goal to move forward with, we would incorporate this data of how much new density it creates, how much additional vehicular traffic it creates, and how much more parking demand is. Then we will analyze that based on what is existing and make recommendations on modifications that would be needed.
Thanks.
I have a crazy question. So like, have you guys ever taken a city, maybe even bigger than ours, and put in like a trolley system or said something about that? You know, maybe that be a suggestion you guys have? Because it would be neat to have that from, you know, the outlet mall to the aquarium to down there to downtown, and that kind of would alleviate some of our traffic problems, or not traffic, parking problems. I've been here a long time and I don't know where you're going to find parking. It's not going to, empty spaces, they're just not there. I really want to know have you guys ever thought about, have you ever suggested that to a town and it actually worked?
We've worked in many different destinations that have either they're combating kind of a similar to what you were mentioning there, a parking problem, but also some seasonal problems. We work very closely with Visit California throughout their various regions, and Coronado specifically, which is a little island off of San Diego, does not have a lot of roads and sidewalks to work with, but they have a heavy seasonal traffic. I won't say problem because obviously it is great for their economy and something that they recognize, but in terms of getting to and from the island and once you're there, how to get around, implementing a trolley system, but also bikes on the island that people can rent and use on a day-by-day basis was something that was recently implemented. We've done a strategic plan with them. So to your point, yes, other communities have. It's typically more seasonally run or something that could be done on the weekends, but certainly could be an opportunity or an avenue to try and alleviate some of that downtown parking. But I think also to that point, it could help with the connectivity from the riverfront, the new outlet mall, being able to connect those assets would be a big strength. Oh, can you hear me now?
Are you? Maybe?
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. I was just going to say, it could also be a way to connect riverfront, downtown, the outlet mall, being able to leverage those assets from a connectivity point is certainly a opportunity there. Any other questions?
Any other questions
I
from
think
the
from-
commissioners? Nope. Okay, we'll go ahead and open the floor to the public. If there's anybody that has questions or comments, go ahead and come forward and give your name and address, please.
It's your invitation, Charlotte. She's got a list. Prepared like always.
Straightforward. Charlotte Montgomery, 10612 South Fir Avenue. Will this presentation be put on the website? Because I liked a lot of the stuff, but I can't write that fast.
Yes.
Well, I mean, still, I'm going to have to be pausing, to write it down and be a lot
Yes,
easier.
it will
Okay.
be.
Did this concept include the library property?
We are collaborating with the consultant on that property specifically based on their recommendations and what it may or may not look like moving forward.
Okay. And does any part of this look at how how the master plan would work with the Riverwalk and with the aquarium campus? Because there's a lot of development going on, especially with High Five. We keep hoping we'll hear about that being open, breaking ground and opening up. That's very family-oriented. What kind of work has been done or coordinated with those areas with this plan?
Lexi, do you want to try and answer that? I know that one of the stakeholders in the meetings was the aquarium, so there was, or at least, I don't remember who specifically was there, maybe a couple of people, but they spoke with you. Go ahead. Do you want to talk about that coordination?
Yeah, I was going to say, no, it's a great point, and it's something that we, to Marseille's point, we're trying to be very cognizant of in terms of wanting to understand what they had slated for development, because also don't want to have duplicate efforts or recommend anything that could be potentially competitive, more so looking to be complementary. So we were in conversations with them from ultimately the jump of our analysis from the site visit forward to understand kind of areas of opportunities to, again, connect the two. So we took a look at their existing visitation, who they currently are attracting from outside of the local area, and where typically people will come either before or after either visiting the aquarium or the riverfront to, again, find more opportunities for synergy. And a lot of that, if they were stopping beforehand or after, it was in those downtown restaurants and on Main Street. So basically just wanting to understand what can further that relationship was definitely at the forefront of our analysis. So a lot of data and analytics that went into it, but we tried to synthesize this presentation here today. But it was very much in consideration because it is a great asset for the community and something that downtown can only further build upon.
One of the main reasons I ask that question is at council and at all the meetings we have with the Planning Commission, we talk about that we don't want people to come to Jenks and spend an afternoon. We want them to come in the morning. We want them, to be going to the aquarium or to the ball fields, and then they go do some shopping at the outlet mall. And meanwhile, they've grabbed lunch downtown, and then we want them to stay the evening, and they say, you know what? We still want to go to High Five and do things there. We want to spend the night here. So that's why I bring up, how is this interlaced with the development of the outlet mall south, Aquarium Campus, and the Riverwalk. I hear you talking about this all the time. How can we keep people here, and how can we move them to these destinations effectively? So I get your point about the trolley. The other thing, I know that you talked a little bit about the parking, and that will be coming out in the next phase, but I didn't hear anything about traffic, because I saw on the RFQ where that was a separate area. So is the parking is that the traffic conversation going to be with the parking analysis, or is that going to be separate? It'll be with it, okay.
I believe the traffic and the parking are the same analysis. They're coupled together.
Okay. And then the newest thing, at least that I was very excited to hear about, was the Leverage Act. And boy, what a big piece of information to toss into the impact to downtown with this study that's going on. And so I sure hope that that's going to be a topic with the chamber on how to, again, interlace the Leverage Act with this plan. I mean, to Chair West's comment about how do we get, how are we, what are you saying we, how do we get people here? I mean, we've been trying all kinds of things. We have all kinds of incentive programs. We have TIFs. We do economic development agreements. And so I think the Leverage Act is going to be pretty important. So I do hope that Hunden is planning that that's going to come into the discussion with this, because I think it could be significant in achieving those goals. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte.
I may have to educate Hunden on the Leverage Act. I think that might be the first they've heard of it.
238 million.
Does anybody else from the audience wish to speak?
I'm Don Beck. I'm with Beck Design. I wanted just to follow up on a couple of comments about the transportation issue in developing the Bricktown Master Plan many, many years ago. One of the early concepts was a rail system, but it just took recently hold, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, MAPS 3, I think, where it was funded. But in the meantime, what we did was use a trolley system that was tire, rubber-based, and which is a lot cheaper to operate and to use. And so we would probably be looking at some kind of recommendation like that to connect all the destinations together. And again, the parking analysis, the final parking need would be driven based on the development need. So, Mr. Sellers, to your point, if you're adding additional retail or office, there's a driver, there's a demand, so many parking spaces per square foot or per occupant load. And so based on that, in a 5-year or 10-year plan would drive the parking need. And those can be all over the places. We've done all kinds of projects. We have one in Oklahoma City. We renovated the old library, cut a hole in the old library building before we built the new one, and we put parking on the second floor of an existing building. It's a poured in place concrete frame building. The second floor is designed for heavy book loads. And actually, the car loads were lighter than the book loads. There's all kinds of creative solutions out there. When we develop a master plan for a city that we're working with you guys right now, we're a national, we have national reach, and we've already been contacted by 3 different developers looking for hotel sites in the Tulsa metro area. So we get that, and the we who's developing that is this kind of public-private partnership, and those kind of things go to TIF funding that was mentioned earlier. We've worked on projects in Oklahoma City, the Concord Hotel, where there were really no taxes for like the first 10 years as an incentive from the city. So there's all kinds of things that developers are looking at, and we do a lot of work with those development teams. So that's part of our responsibility in Hunden to bring those people available to you, those developers. So that's just kind of the part of the process. Keep in mind, we're maybe a third or almost 2/3 of the way through the study, so there's a lot we don't know yet, but we're just trying to make sure that we get all the base information, because the plan is only as good as the information it's based on. And so we're trying to gather all that information so when we make a recommendation that it's valid and it works for you. So there's still a lot of work to do. So I just wanted to touch base on those couple of items. Thanks for hearing me.
Thank you, Don. Anyone else?
This question, we'll move on to the next phase of the presentation, if that's okay.
Sure, thank you.
All right. Very much. As mentioned earlier, I said 3 phases. We're looking at 4 different phases for the overall master plan. Again, that first phase was the market study, the traffic study, and looking at the economic environment. Phase 2, which is kind of what I'm starting to show you today, is taking all of that data and creating a framework and a concept and trying to create one cohesive, authentic vision for what Jenks could be. And that starts to take a lot of public input. So what I'm showing you today is something that we will be presenting on the 26th, which is this Saturday at the Urban Garden Festival. And we will also be presenting this information for public input on May 31st for the Food Truck Festival. And again, feel free to stop us at any point and you have any questions as we go through. 26th of April. Okay, and 31st of May. Okay. Saturday. As part of our team, Beck Design, we are leading the effort. You got to hear from Hunden Strategic Partners. Walter P. Moore, civil engineer, they have taken the brunt of the parking analysis. And SWA, specifically working with the Houston office, they are landscape architects, planning, zoning, and urban design. So they have been aiding with a lot of this information. Building upon Hunden's kind of analysis and recommendations, they identified quite a few sites that were comparable to Jenks. There was about 6 or 7 examples that were comparable in size and amenities, and 4 that were aspirational, which is where Jenks could potentially be in the next 5 to 10 years. So we took a lot of that information, presented it to the city, and started to identify and kind of par down which of those more align themselves with the current development plans for Jenks. So we've taken the 4 I'm going to show you are the Rose District in Broken Arrow, Brookside in Tulsa, Bentonville, and Paducah, Kentucky. So each of those has different amenities. There are different elements that make them successful. I'll try to go kind of through them. There is a lot of information within this package, but some of the bigger things to notice, when you see the larger purple kind of outline, that is what we're considering the study area, and it's approximately 98 acres. The kind of purple pinkish color is the more concentrated core, which is the micro study. It's about 28 acres. And the white line, it is a little difficult to see on here, but the white line with the circle is a half a mile, which is considered roughly a 10-minute walk. And that's to kind of demonstrate the spaces that are walkable. Right now, if you were to take what is the core of downtown Jenks, you are just outside of 5 minutes walking distance to the aquarium or to the Riverwalk. Other information that you'll find in green has to do more with the physical assets. How many parking spaces there are within the larger study, how many parking spaces exist within the micro-study area, in addition to what we're calling the Assume program, which is taking the information currently available through the city of Jenks and how many office spaces, how many retail spaces, multifamily, and others being considered things that don't fall into those categories, such as anything from a museum to churches, courthouses, kind of anything else that doesn't fall into those 4 categories.
Anthony, quick question. In the Assume program, is that within the full study area?
The full study
Okay,
area, yes,
thank you.
correct.
And that is currently what exists?
Yes, that is currently what exists as of the information obtained, I believe, 4 weeks ago.
Sure.
So in like the first one we said, Rose District, there are a lot of comparables there. The larger study area is about 80 acres with the micro comparison area 28 acres. The reason there's going to be a little bit of fluctuation between the study site is due to the block sizes. Some areas have blocks that are larger, some that are smaller, and what I wanted to do is stop at a mid-block or at a full intersection. And that kind of some of the discrepancies and why it's not exactly identical in study areas. But one of the things, especially on the bottom right, that you'll see, I'll go back. The right-of-way that exists right now in Jenks is 80 feet, and the buildings are built to the lot line. So you have 80 feet from the face of one building to the next. So that accounts for sidewalks, parking, and street. When we look at Rose District, they have 100 feet. So it's a little bit wider. But one of the things that we kind of found, realizing that what makes Rose District very feel safe, walkable, are some of the amenities that includes the light, a lot of storefronts. It's very inviting, but also creating a buffer between the pedestrian realm and the vehicular traffic. Now, it does have angled parking, very similar to what you have now, but as you can see in the image, it also creates much more buffer zones, and you're not walking through trying to navigate what feels like more asphalt than walking spaces. They've also had a lot of emphasis on the green space and creating, in essence, a wall of retail, which kind of defines your boundaries and the verticality, how high it is, 1 story, 2 story, 3 stories. It creates a sense of enclosure that can then be broken up with trees and planting, bringing it to a human scale. But having uses on the second floor also creates different levels of how you view this kind of tapestry. So people looking out or people looking up to see more activation. Even if there's not people on the streets, you're seeing a lot of things happening, whether it's on the storefronts or in the spaces above. Other things to kind of note is the difference in parking. For example, the micro-study area, again being 28 acres, at the Rose Districts, they have 214 parking spots. Jenks currently has 828 parking spots. And they're still creating a very lively living space and space for people to kind of move around the downtown. The second example, which is almost on the flip side, is Brookside. Brookside being very successful. What we find is Brookside has significantly more parking within the micro area, and it has a lot more office, more retail, more multifamily. So it has a lot more of everything. However, in a comparable size, one of the things where we notice on the front right, it's also 80 feet from building to building, the street right away. And it looks a lot closer to what we have in Jenks. However, this has 2 lanes of parking and parallel parking. So there is a lot of parking. However, it is from a urban design and landscape standpoint, it is not very welcoming. It's not very inviting. People aren't really walking. But you do have, because of a higher density, you have more people in the area in that proximity able to walk to the businesses, not necessarily always having to drive. And also the appeal. Brookside does have kind of a connotation, and its location in Midtown also creates a destination where people are traveling and going and frequenting these places, even though it is not, from a placemaking standpoint, the best. But they do have the name recognition, and they have the history, and they have a much higher density. When we look at Bentonville, Arkansas, one of the things I do want to point out is in the kind of micro study area, they do have more parking that currently exists in Jenks, but their uses, their office spaces and their multifamily is significantly higher than Jenks. Again, there's a lot more concentration of people. It is more densely populated. And as you can see, there's also a hotel in the immediate proximity, and there's plans for a second hotel that I believe is starting soon. So all of this density is creating the need for more hotel. They are having much more visitors. The final comparison is Paducah in Kentucky. Again, one of the things that we see on a similar comparison area, they have about the same number of parking spaces in a micro-study area. However, their density is also much higher. When we compare the office, retail, restaurant, and particularly multifamily, it is a lot more dense, meaning they have a lot more people within that same square footage. And in addition, Paducah includes courthouses, city offices, 3 churches, 2 museums, and other spaces that are dedicated to arts, such as a theater and a movie theater, all within that same downtown space. So once you start to include all those spaces, you can see that they've started to develop 3- and 4-story buildings so that they have that density to support all those spaces and are able to fully leverage what they have with much less parking, creating spaces that are more walkable, creating much more of a pedestrian-friendly streetscape where you start to buffer the parking and vehicular traffic from sidewalk cafes and people being able to linger and stick around. Brandon, could you go to the other one, please? Taking all of that information into consideration, we looked at what interventions, what things can we do, starting from small to big, within the city streetscape that will help promote and encourage some of these developers to come in and spend their money within Jenks. Mr. West, you did ask about how those public partnerships work. This is one of those vehicles on investing in the public infrastructure and public realm, helps encourage and bring developers of a different caliber, maybe looking at different ideas rather than just trying to maximize their dollars, but helping create that identity of Jenks and enhancing that authenticity, enhancing the charm that you already have. If we look on the top right, this is keeping that angled parking. So we would be losing some parking by creating more green spaces. However, you can see creating a larger, they're called bulb outs at the corners or mid intersections. What it does is it creates a safer crossing for pedestrians, safer intersections for vehicles as well. As of now, when you have parking all the way up to the intersection, it's hard to see. Exactly. So one of the things this does, it kind of has multiple benefits, right? It's safer for pedestrians. It's safer for people crossing in their vehicles. And it also brings in a lot more greenscape and seasonal plantings that can help kind of liven up the space. It feels safer, feels more manageable, and you're now creating a buffer zone between where people are actively walking on the street, and it also starts to slow down traffic.
What were those areas at the intersection? What were those called?
They're called bulb outs. Bulb.
B-O-L-D?
B-U-L-B.
B-
Yeah, like a light bulb. So it comes down, it has to do more with the shape.
I like that.
So we're also looking at kind of mid-street crossings. And that way, again, trying to encourage people that where you park, you're experiencing and traversing through a block. You're not having to walk an entire block to cross the street. You're crossing halfway in a safer space. And then again, this really doesn't take away the existing parking. There are some, but it really minimizes the amount of parking we're taking with having the great benefit of a lot of more landscaping and creating those buffers, creating those amenities. Now with this, we are looking at maintaining the sidewalks the size that they are now, which is roughly 8 feet in some sections. I believe it's up to 12 feet in others. But the way their sidewalks are currently, what visually looks like a sidewalk is only about 5 feet. This starts to take advantage of that kind of residual space and also creates a sense of a corridor that brings you closer to the businesses. Having the right landscaping and the right trees provides shade. If you, on that other image I showed, even as those Google, you see all the sun. Other things that can start to be added are kind of awnings, creating architectural features, something that ties and makes all of this cohesive. And it has the same kind of architectural language throughout so that you don't feel like you're in a completely separate part once you walk east a couple of blocks or west. So that was kind of one potential option. As we look at option 2, this is what we see most prevalent in all the examples we showed you, which is parallel parking. So now parallel parking reduces the amount of parking to a more significant level than keeping the angled parking. However, going to parallel parking allows us to add approximately 7 more feet to what we're calling the pedestrian realm. So in a human scale, that means you can now have benches, you can have seating areas outside of restaurants, and whenever you can bring someone in and they have patio seating in addition to exterior seating on the front, it creates an amenity that's much more desirable. And again, there's a lot of different interventions, but what I wanted to really show on this is what that 7 feet does. If you see on the right, we lined a lot of tables just to show you that, how many tables you could fit, how much more active a space can be. And then you're still creating a kind of a semi-private space, but still very open by all the landscape buffers. So the sense of, you don't lose the sense of scale of a street and what a street is, but you also have that human sense of where you feel safe and separating vehicles and traffic. The third one is something we did not see in any of the selected comparisons. Most of the comparisons were in the aspirational, which then started to develop something that was a little more dense and a little bit larger than what Jenks currently is. But one of the things that they started to do once they reach a certain masses, they start to dedicate certain blocks or portions of blocks completely to pedestrians, and they remove parking to the side streets or the adjacent street. So we also wanted to show that example, even though that was not one of the selected sites. It is a common theme that is becoming much more popular as some of these cities start to grow a little bit larger. And again, what we're showing here, you are adding approximately 14 more feet to the sidewalks by removing parking completely. There are a couple of different trade-offs whenever you do this. Now again, having parking in itself does help slow down traffic a little bit. When you remove that parking completely, you don't have as much slowing down of traffic. However, because you have a much wider space at the sidewalk, you can have different multimodal types of transportation, whether it's bikes, scooters. You can have other forms of transportation moving along that space when you have 14 feet, and you can have a very dedicated and aligned outdoor space. You can introduce a lot more seating spaces. You can create public amenities that are not necessarily tied to a restaurant or retailer, but it can be a handful of benches or small gathering spaces for informal conversations that are inside the right-of-way from the city perspective. So again, there's a lot of benefits to each one of these. However, today we wanted to present these. The idea is, again, building on step by step. This step is addressing from a public realm, a safety standpoint, what the community would like to see, if they prefer any of these options or a combination of, getting their feedback, so then we'll start to expand out. Where do we implement these ideas? Which blocks, how long? How do we start to make connections between all the different destinations? So I know it's a slow-moving process, but we want to make sure that we don't move ahead without having that full understanding of what the city wants, what the community wants, and what the kind of the appetite for development is from the private sector as well.
How long does something like this take to accomplish? From right now?
From right now?
Today.
There are a couple of different aspects. So it depends on how much you want to spend. Right, fortunately, like if you
Well,
want
it's
to
not my money, we'll spend whatever.
If you want a fully developed, like if we're looking at something like this and you want fully developed landscape trees, we are looking at a much higher expense because you are looking at fully grown developed trees. If this is something you want to develop over the next 5 years, you can look at much smaller plantings that will eventually grow into having a nice shade canopy. So there are different levels of implementation. I don't have a breakdown of the cost analysis.
So like if somebody did this, you could actually do the one before this. And then if things went right, you could turn that one into the second one or the third one, however you
Yes.
want to look at it. But like you did this in other cities. If a city says they want to do this, how long does something like that take?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that right now.
Oh,
I might have
here
more
comes the
information.
guy.
I can address that based on past projects where we've, or other cities we've worked on like this. From the time a contractor would start, it's probably about a 6 to 8 month period, depending upon the utility infrastructure that might have to be modified. And earlier I mentioned Bricktown. In Bricktown, we had to move a lot of water lines and upgrade lines. And a lot of the drains were the old clay tile. So there was a lot of infrastructure upgrade. But once that was cleared out and moved, and we had irrevocable permits with the city, it was about a 6 or 8 month process to pull up the concrete, new pavers, and planting in trees. And the type of trees we use there were lace bark elms. So we can prune those up about 10, 12 feet, and they create a canopy. Not like a Bradford pear, which is our least favorite. Don't like those trees. And, they're brittle, they're just not a good Oklahoma tree, but the right tree and in the right caliper. So when these are planted in day one, they're a good solid 10, 12, 14, 16 feet tall. Maybe 4 or 5 inch calipers, so you can create that canopy and that shade. One thing it does for your economy and your merchants, your business people downtown, when you widen that sidewalk, you just added leasable, rentable square footage for them. And when we do this, you see, especially on restaurants, tables and chairs and outdoor dining, weather permitting in Oklahoma, I realize where we are, but it's a big draw for a first floor retail space because they can move out and now they can capture that space. Of course, you do something like this, you're gonna lose some parking, and then that'll be our job to find a place to make that parking up. So, and we don't know what the parking solution is, we're not that deep into it. I don't know, sometimes we've seen projects where we've had underground parking, there could be a parking garage, there's all kinds of solutions that we just don't know yet what that demand's gonna be. But time-wise, to landscape and do something like this can be a 6 or 8 month process, and we typically will take one block at a time and just move on down and do it.
I just feel like this is how you change our downtown.
I agree with Craig
if
100%.
if you make that happen, then I go take my family down there. Not that I don't already, but I mean, you can actually go sit and eat and spend some time. It's not cramped sidewalks and.
Well, Craig, to your point, we've got one business down there, Rustic Gate Creamery, that has the space out front with tables, and there's people there every night, 10 or 12 or 15 every time you drive by.
Yep.
We've got one of them, and it's always full.
That's what this kind of space will do for you. And we know national developers that'll come into Jenks and Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, all the places around the country, Dallas, they're looking for this. And if the developer sees you're really making a commitment, and unfortunately, the we on this is we, the city. You got to make some kind of investment.
We the people.
But that's what we did in Bricktown years ago. I mean, I've lived over there 30, 40 years. I'm here now. But we couldn't get anything passed in Bricktown. But finally, when the city made a commitment on MAPS 1, which we were part of, then we invested in ourselves. And when developers saw that, the spinoff now is pretty incredible. And it's the same kind of thing. This is what developers are looking for.
Is there an option of, I was in Santa Barbara, and their downtown area is actually blocked. So there's no traffic other than runners, scooters, and that sort of thing. Has that been something that's been discussed at all? I mean, basically you have an entire square footage of area that would be an entertainment district. The outdoor seating would be further out on the street or close to the street, what would have been a street type thing. Is that been something that's looked at as other cities in this region where it would make sense?
We haven't seen that much in Oklahoma, in the cities we worked with in this state, because there just hasn't been much of that strong of a demand driver that you could justify closing the entire street, because when you do that, you're gonna push vehicular traffic out.
Every single one of the study areas had a version of that, but it was only temporary.
Well,
So whether it's on a weekday, on a weekend for farmer's market, for special events, where it was closed, but it was recurring enough that I think from a traffic flow pattern, everyone understood what days it was closed. But none of them had a fully closed street.
Where I went, it was packed on a weekday. That's the only reason I ask, and there were several restaurants, businesses up and down that were just
Perry
packed.
Street
So-
in Tulsa did that kind of pre-COVID. They would close 4 or 5 blocks for 3/4 of, for 6 or 8 hours, most of the day, for a farmer's market. And the business owners, their business was booming. There was so many people, the streets were full of people. So you might do that on a limited basis.
I just have a comment about Brookside. I love your point to the landscaping and feeling a little, more closed in or cozy. I don't like to shop on Brookside, although there's some cool spots there, because I feel like the traffic is so heavy and it just doesn't feel, like you said, walkable. It doesn't feel friendly. It feels like it's just very heavy traffic, just zooming by. I'm shocked to see that there's 10,000 cars daily that goes on Main Street Jenks. I'm wondering if this slows that down. I know we want people there, but I also don't think you want super heavy traffic for pedestrians. I'm just wondering if there's a way to kind of do something kind of halfway in between. It's like slow the traffic down a little bit going through here. Maybe there's not so many and it's still directed on the outskirts, but yet you can still go in and park. Because I also know people are kind of lazy and they don't like to walk very far when it comes to running in some of the, at least retail boutiques. Maybe not restaurants, but I do anyway. If I want to go to a bakery or a coffee or a quick shop, I want to be able to park, go in, come back out fairly quickly. So I'm just kind of thinking about that. I love the landscape. I think that would be pretty heavy traffic. I'm trying to figure out how.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that, and whenever you do have that convenience of having parking on street, it is quite a valuable asset. As far as the traffic flow, whenever you do start to slow down traffic, naturally, those that really want to avoid it start to deviate. So you start to have natural altering of traffic patterns. Unfortunately, it is a little bit hard to have the precise metrics of how that traffic is going to react. But what we do see is that these measures of slowing traffic down really encourages people that are using it as a bypass to go a different route, and the people that are using it more likely to stop or linger longer. No, whenever Hunden look at the traffic, they use a lot of different software that tracks cell phone usage through, and based on the speed and how fast it moves, we can deduce that it is traffic flowing, and that is a cumulative through downtown, majority of it being early in the morning and in the evening. So you could kind of deduce some of that traffic is getting across to Tulsa off of the highway, and some of that traffic is also coming off of Riverside, getting across to the west side.
What's that number look like to like the Rose District? How many cars go down the Rose District? Do you guys know that?
I don't have a count.
Because I can say that there's probably 10,000 cars that go by my office, which is further east or west. But I would have a hard time believing right down our main street, there's 10,000 cars. Because it's, huh?
Walter P. Moore did.
Going home south.
But they're usually on that far side.
We have NCOG's data, it's available online, and it's very similar. Like, you can find all of the different, in Oklahoma, like, you can find Brookside, Broken Arrow, the Rose District, Jenks, all of them, and their data is very similar. And then the rest, Placer AI is a very common software, which the city does have it. I haven't been using it, but I was trying to think, I do think that Walter P. Moore did have that in one of their studies.
They did it. In addition, Walter P. Moore, our traffic parking consultant, came here and they actually did a physical count during the week and on the weekend. So they had 3 people here, and that's why you need another hotel. They need a place to stay. But there were 3 people here counting cars all day, and that's the count they came up with. I mean, they physically counted. Each car went by, they clicked. So
I think you touched on where I was going with that. I just could not verbalize that. Getting the pass-through traffic to be going on the side streets somehow. I mean, I think as a city, we need to be thinking about how do we structure the side streets to accommodate pass-through traffic so that Main Street is shoppers and restaurant goers. That's, to me, is the solution to creating that family-friendly, pedestrian-family environment, but we've got to figure out how to get that pass through, because I do that myself, and especially those that have kids going to the school. They're passing through because that's their only way to get to the school and back home. So, yeah.
In addition to the Main Street, we also need to look at and focus, pay attention to the streets to the south and the north. And so that's all part of that study.
And then maybe just one more point is that I noticed, and I think in your in your parking numbers, those included, and it may not be a problem at all, but just something to point out, the school parking and some of the administrative building parking, which I don't know is necessarily available on a regular day. And that's a lot of the actual parking that I can tell anyway, because there's 3 large parking lots that are included in this purple space that are school.
Right, as we present that information, we do have it broken down a little
But
more
it's
succinctly. The
part of
school
that.
parking lots are not included. Those are considered private, and we've removed them from the parking count.
I've spoken with school officials about potential parking there, just if it's a possibility to even explore. And they're pretty negative about it, and I don't blame them because they don't want people down there at 10, 11 o'clock at night leaving whatever paraphernalia in their parking lots when they've got students arriving the next morning at 7 o'clock. Somebody would have to be assigned to clean those lots every single night. So that's their concern, which is valid. And it is kind of private to them.
Have any other questions?
I have one. It's just kind of for fun. You talked about a while ago different identities for different areas. We've got Rose District, Brookside, Bentonville Square, Blue Dome, Brady Arts, Cherry Street. Do you think that the Jenks downtown district would probably get named? Do you think that's a good idea?
You mean nicknamed?
Well,
Or
like
Branding.
Rose, Brookside, Blue
Oh,
Dome, Brady
those are
Arts.
all-
Oh, I think to some
What-
extent it already has. I had visitors from Illinois, and they've only been to Oklahoma a few times. But one of the places they wanted to go to was Jenks, because they heard it with all the shops, and it was like the antique capital of the world or something. And it was news to me. I really didn't know that. But so I had visitors. I had 6 visitors from Illinois, and they wanted to go to Jenks. So we came to Jenks and we spent the day downtown. It was really a pleasant day. So I don't know how they knew about it in Illinois, but when they were researching things to do in the Tulsa metro area, it was, you need to go see Jenks. So yes, I think if you do something like this, it doesn't happen overnight. When we did the Bricktown Masterplan, I did that in 1979, 1980. Some of you weren't even born probably then, but it took
Not Brandon.
maybe you're a 3rd grader, but Bricktown took 15, 18 years to really become successful. And now it's hit a home run. So this doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time. There's always a lot of question, did we do the right thing? But we've yet to see one of these master plans that we've worked on in a community not pay off. But it doesn't happen.
Do most of your areas that you work with end up being named
branded.
Yeah, they get nicknamed. I mean,
I'll answer the question.
you answer, okay?
Branding was part of the original RFP, and it was taken out with an executive decision. And I have a quote from Beck Design. They have an incredible gentleman who was part of the conversation in the beginning, because that was part of the RFP. And I have a quote from them for what it would cost. I have presented that to the executive team at the city of Jenks, and we are looking at that. We have one counselor that is very passionate about seeing Jenks branded and having a public conversation about who is Jenks. And that's something I've been saying to you all for 5 years. Like, Jenks doesn't exactly know who they are. They don't know exactly where they're going or who they want to be when they grow up. We have an idea, but that tagline, that name, those colors, that logo has not been established. And I think what Commissioner West is asking, how important is branding? If you're going to spend this many dollars on redoing the streetscape, the infrastructure, how important is branding in addition to that?
It just seems like every other place has a brand name.
Thank you. Wasn't connecting
I wasn't
that way.
presenting it very
But
well.
the company we brought on, it's a company called Chandler Thinks, and I think they're out of Tennessee, and they had an extremely impressive portfolio of helping communities kind of come up, develop an image, logos, mapping, and flags for light poles, but really kind of put people on the map. And so branding from that aspect is really critical. It's a tremendous investment, and I think that's one of the biggest payoffs you'll get, because it really reaches out to a lot of the social markets. If I was sitting in your seat, I would find a way. If you need the funds, I'd find a way to scrape together the money to do that. That's a really important element.
I think one of the most important elements of that branding exercise is having that input and buy-in from the entire community.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be, your ambassadors are the same business owners, the citizens of Jenks are going to be ambassadors for that branding, and they are the ones that are going to promote that branding. So it is important. Whether the district gets named or not, we've seen examples of both. Sometimes you go through a branding exercise and it still ends up being downtown Jenks. And the reason, and it doesn't make it any less successful than having another name. However, it's the cohesion, the identity of it, and kind of that buy-in from it.
How about the West District?
Good point to bring up. I hadn't really thought much about that, because we're focused on parking and all the other issues.
Yeah.
That's we need that.
I kind of think what the branding does, which I think is extremely important, is put everybody on the same page of like, that's your mission, that's kind of your goal. Otherwise, you've kind of got a little bit of mixed messages. I think the branding is super important, just my opinion.
But the problem is how do you get everybody's input? Currently, we have 2 people watching this YouTube tonight,
They're probably employees.
and I was one of them. You're 100% correct, Rob.
I will say that
They wait till it's happened, and then they,
we have some new tools. We'll just put it like, we have some new tools for reaching the public that I think will be very instrumental in addition to the processes that we're starting here. So I think that we can grab a broader audience and have a broader conversation than what we've been able to have in the past. If you don't do something digital, you're not going to get the full buy-in, because you only answer surveys on your phone. That's it. So if you're not doing surveys on your phone, you're probably not getting the full buy-in from the public. And you can't vote more than once. Craig?
Well, and before I forget, I do have one other thing to show. The information that we showed tonight, we are planning on presenting it in a physical format on the 26th of Saturday. So I just brought one example of the first 2 slides, which has the information presented today in addition to where we are on the map. So we'll have 6 of these for the next 2 festivals. And hopefully we get a lot of input from the community at those events.
what do you do to try to build momentum and get the word out and get that input from the community? What
One of
do
the
you
things we're
do?
doing, definitely working with the city and the communications to make sure everyone knows at the time that we're going to be there and what days. And we also try to make that public on our social media accounts to try to reach the widest audience possible.
We've had a few in-person, kind of like town hall type meetings, and we'll continue to do that. And we're trying to get as much information and feedback as we can. And so there's that old saying, people are usually down on what they're not up on. So we got to get them up to speed on this and get their support. It's not easy. I mean, it's, you know, but once we see people get engaged, they kind of get a fire and they look at the possibility. And it's like, we just need to get everybody pulling on the same rope in the right direction. And, you know, I mean, it's doable, but it's hard work and, but it's worth doing. It's a big investment in time.
What have you seen that's successful as far as getting public input? Because to me, the best way to get buy-in is to get as much input, and then, you know, of course, decisions are made upon that, but then at least they felt like they had input and are more apt for the buy-in. What have you seen that has worked to get, to really pull that information from the public and get their input?
In some projects, we've actually almost had to go door to door and try to talk with owners, you know, that vendors, you know, businesses, retail that had storefront, and really encourage them. And if they don't want to go to a meeting, and then we kind of do a one-on-one interview with them right there. We kind of go with the survey with 3 or 4 basic questions. So if they're not available or they don't want to come to a public meeting, some people don't want to speak in public, they're not comfortable with it, then we'll ask kind of quick little survey, what's your thought? Give us 3 minutes of your time if you would. But when we're doing all those kind of things with the public, one of the first things we do is let everybody know we're going to get many, many recommendations, hundreds, but not all of them can be incorporated. They're all going to be prioritized, and because you're asking for something doesn't necessarily mean it's going to show up in the final design or get built. But somewhere we have to draw the line. You know, there's this old saying, form follows function in design. Now we say form follows finance, because the budget pretty much drives everything that we do in all of our decisions. So all the information we collect from these public meetings gets prioritized, and we let people know right up front. You know, if a suggestion doesn't get built, it doesn't mean it wasn't thought through or thought about. So it's, you know, not gonna make everybody happy all the time, and there's a limit on every idea that we can incorporate. So, but our job is to test out all the best ones, the highest priority, and ultimately you make the decisions. I mean, this is your city, it's your money, and you know what we're trying to do is bring to you all the possible ideas of what we think you should be considering. And at the end of the day, our goal is to not have any surprises. We want you to look at it, you know, look at the solutions and think about, you know, what's being built, how's it going to change our city, and we want to make sure that there hasn't been any ideas that haven't been investigated. So that's what we're after.
So like, could you guys come speak to the chamber lunch?
We do that, we speak to Chamber.
So
we
in
speak to
June?
Rotary.
Could you guys do that in June?
I think we could, yeah.
I mean, you got probably 75 to 100 people there sometimes. I may be wrong, Angie, am I right? You got 75 to 100 of the business owners in Jenks there, so that'd be a good time to show them that.
Be happy to do that. We do that.
That's the lady back there.
Okay. So we're Rotary members. We're always making some kind of presentation to a Rotary somewhere in some city. Chamber, Rotary, Lions Clubs, whatever we need to do.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for your time. I know it's a special meeting, and everybody came out, and we appreciate your time because we need your input. We need you to be involved. Thank you.
I want to thank Mr. Beck, and I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name when you first came.
Anthony Miave.
Anthony, yeah. Mr. Beck and Anthony for your presentation. I thought it was top-notch, and I so appreciate the recommendations that you guys presented. Really impressed. And for me, I think this portion of it is priority one. Seems like it could be done the quickest and maybe the easiest. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
We'd like to thank the staff, Marseille, Brandon, and a lot of the city planners. I mean, you guys have been supportive, you've been easy to work with. The information we've got has really been helpful, so you have a great staff, and there's this old saying, you're only as good as your client, and you guys have been really great to work with, so thank you.
Thanks, sir. We agree with you. Any other comments from commission? Nope. All right. We'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 7:41. Thank you.